Good morning and welcome to everybody from Southeastern Europe, but also from across the globe. We are very happy to welcome you to the fifth webinar of UrbanByNature Southeastern Europe Hub. This webinar series is supported by the Clever Cities project, and today's session will be on evaluating social impacts on implemented nature-based solutions. My name is Ana Mitić-Radulović, and on behalf of Zeus from Belgrade, I will be facilitating this webinar today. I will have the pleasure to talk to very interesting and very appreciated speakers from Clever Cities Consortium and also from the region, from the city of Zagreb. A couple of important points before we start. This webinar is being recorded, and there is also a live translation into our local language. You can access it with a symbol with the globe in your control panel. In this fifth webinar, with a focus on community-based monitoring practices for nature-based solutions, we have a very interesting line of speakers, as I already said. We will start with Isra Mahmoud, an assistant professor from Laboratory of Urban Simulation in the Department of Architecture at Politecnico di Milano. Isra served as a Clever Cities project leader for the city of Milano, so she will speak on the Clever Cities co-creation guidance and experiences, as well as the experience of the city of Milan in setting a social monitoring framework for nature-based solutions. Afterwards, we will hear more about the local context in Southeastern Europe from Iva Bedenko from the city of Zagreb, from Croatia's Office for Economy, Environmental Sustainability and Strategic Planning. She will talk about Zagreb's approach to inclusive gardening. After the presentation, we will have a chance to ask questions, but considering that Isra will need to leave a little bit earlier the webinar, questions to Isra can be headed towards her after her presentation. You can actually ask the questions in any moment during the webinar, during the presentations. You can write your questions in the question and answer tab or in the chat tab, and we will read them and discuss the questions you write. And another notification is that if you want to connect with your fellow professionals attending this webinar, you can write your name, your institution, and email address in the chat box. So before we proceed with presentations, I would only like to say that in this series, supported with the Clever Cities, this is the last webinar that we are preparing. All our webinars follow the UrbanByNature methodology on co-creative planning and implementation of nature-based solutions. So this is the step 6, focused on monitoring of implementation of nature-based solutions, but also of monitoring social impacts of implemented NBS. So without further ado, I would like to invite Isra to present us the experiences from the city of Milan and also her initial experiences in setting the co-creation guidance, which has been highly appreciated and also referred to in the urban greening plans guidance. Thank you, and Isra, you can share your presentation with us.
Thank you, Anna, for this introduction. I am sharing my screen.
Great.
Yes, and you can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for inviting me for this webinar. My name is Isra Mahmoud, and I do work at the Urban Simulation Lab in Politecnico di Milano. I'm an assistant professor, recently promoted to an assistant professor. My presentation today will be looking forward on the co-creation guidance and how did we establish the social monitoring framework for the nature-based solutions impact in Milan, Italy. As part of the Clever Cities, I have been also researching since 2018 on nature-based solutions and green corridors, and I have participated in different webinars related to nature-based solutions and in UrbanByNature program. I have also a few publications on nature-based solutions and how can we use the nature-based solutions to work more on establish social impacts in different contexts within world cities. With no further ado, I will start with the experience from the co-creation guidance that we established within the Clever Cities project. The Clever Cities guidance has focused on 2 parts. The first part is on establishing an urban innovation partnership, which helps the cities to a successful implementation of MBS through shared governance and inclusive way, as well as engaging with citizens. The second part of the guidance looked forward on implementing a pathway that has different steps that are established to be flexible and adaptable to each city context. This methodological pathway that was allocated through different levels of engagement. So we get started by co-creation planning, co-designing, co-implementation, monitoring, and development. But then we figured out that we needed to test this with this guidance and this whole pathway with the cities, and to think about how can we change this according to the cities. So we verified this feasibility of this co-creation methodology within the city of Milan as the first test bed. And when we aim to verify the feasibility and the doability of such complex pathways, we figured out that we needed to readapt with our partners and to understand more what are the interests of the stakeholders and establish different constellations of project within the city's strategic planning framework. So when we did that, we had to readapt our pathway, and we started thinking, and how can we realign our different stages of co-design, co-implementation within the actual implementation of the process, and to be resilient as well to this different unpredicted event, such as COVID-19, and Milan was heavily hit by this, and that caused a lot of delays in construction and administrative procedures, as well as public procurements, and of course added some emerging opportunities. So what we did is that we redesigned this pathway towards understanding more how can we re-engage our stakeholder and keep this simple and readaptable to Milan context. And that was the part of learning by testing from the part of the co-creation guidance. This is another part of the co-creation guidance, which is learning by doing. So in action and in practical aspects of doing co-creation within the city of Milan, what did we do? How did we do that? And what did we learn? So very quickly, just glimpse on what are the different urban living labs of the city of Milan. We have the first urban living lab is Green Roofs and Walls that is called Greening Milano. The second urban living lab is a public park that is in Giambellino 129, which is a social housing neighborhood. And the third urban living lab, which is a Tibaldi train station, that is a green train station that has living a green wall and different aspects of green facades and so on. The first urban living lab has a focus on establishing green roofs and walls, and we had 10 buildings applied for this bando, for this call, and we had to establish a co-design value proposition on each of these different green roofs and walls. But what we learned more from this experience, that the participatory workshop and the MBS intervention, we had to move online due to the pandemic situation. However, what we figured out that it was a success. So one of the prominent case studies that we have in this urban living lab is actually this green wall, which is also in the Giambellino neighborhood, but it has different species, and it was an opportunity to implementation in a public building related to the city of Milan. But we also have the negative aspects, such as acts of vandalism and procedural delays due to the COVID, of course, but however, it was a success. Another experience from the green roofs was the Ponti building that had 4 terraces on 4 social housing. And when we started this process, we figured out that we need to engage with the highly age-ranged population that were living in this building since more than 10, 15 years. So this was also one of the challenges that we have. Giambellino instead had a public park, so we had the possibility to do co-design by immersion workshops with the people residing in this area. And this was before COVID, so we were so lucky. But this experience also gathered us within the local communities, and we could understand more about their needs about that. But during the implementation, what I figured out that we had to change a little bit of the executive design because of the existing infrastructures of electric underground cables. So this experience as well was a little bit delayed with some of the execution problems that we had. In this experience of Giambellino, we had to redesign again our co-creation pathway and co-design within how to reestablish our pathway in a more simple way rather than different 6 or 7 steps or 8 steps. We just figured out that we needed 5. So we had to readapt again our experience. The third and last one, so I can move very quickly on how did we monitor this experiences, is the Tibaldi train stop. And we had 4 different types of nature-based solutions: green walls, reinforced soil designing, and public space, and green public space, as well as nature-based solutions, green noise barriers. This was the initial idea, but then you can see that we already opened the station to the public, and it has very nice green walls, as well as the public space that is nearby, as well as the different parts of green reinforced soil that was around the station. What we also managed to do is to have a cooperation agreement with the University of Bocconi that is to manage the co-maintenance of this. So with the students of the university, there will be different parts that will be also reevaluated with the students and how do they use the space. So what did we learn from this experience of the co-creation process within the city of Milan? When we started the process, we needed to understand that we needed an innovation environment that permits the integration of these nature-based solutions within the system. But whatever that happened afterwards is that the change of the structure and procedures of these different urban innovation partnerships that we established, we needed to have more a multi-scalar and multi-actoral approach to involve different stakeholders within each stage of co-design and complementation, co-development, that in order as well to integrate how can this overcome the short political decision-making cycles that we had within these 5 years. So we started by establishing a methodology to what we call learning by doing, the methodological approach for analysis of co-creation process indicator structures. We started dividing that on different blocks. The first one was looking on the shared governance mechanism. How did the ongoing process work, and how did we manage to break the silos? The flexibility in timeline, the cooperation and collaboration between different stakeholders within different stages, as well as the readaptation of the cities. When we started doing that, within starting March 2020, as it was requested by the European Commission, we established different milestones. We are now almost between the third and the last milestone by the end of the project. And within this timeline, we started by identifying stages, whereas we do theoretical framework development, we do a verification with the cities, and we do a validation with our frontrunner cities. Within this experience, we started by these milestones on establishing the different verifications. So we started by trying to understand what are the possible indicators that could the cities evaluate. And since we divided that on different shared governance, co-creation, and co-design, different kinds of aspects and different kinds of indicators, we started then by thinking of how can we evaluate that in 2 different manners. So we have quantitative indicators and qualitative indicators in this sense. Just a glimpse of how did verification go through. So when we did different workshops within the 3 cities, 3 frontrunner cities, so we have London, Milan, and Hamburg. As Polyme, we were responsible about this task. So we started by identifying, again, as the same cross set of indicators, how the different cities did evaluate themselves. So as you can see, from the experience of the city of London is different than the experience of the city of Milan, as well as the difference within the experience from the city of Hamburg. Each city had their own set of indicators and their own priorities. And that also gave us an idea that not all the different cities have the same experience when it comes to co-creation, even though we had the same steps established within the whole pathway. So for instance, you can see here that the City of London had more indicators related to stakeholders engagement rather than the shared governance aspects or the co-design aspects, and vice versa for the City of Milan and Hamburg. They had more indicators related to the co-design experience rather than the stakeholders engagement. That is mainly due not just to the nature of the indicator itself, but also of the availability of data that we had. In addition, that for instance, you can see that the city of Hamburg decided to do their co-design on small scales, while the city of London did their co-design on a larger scale. So when you have different scales within the implementation of the pathway itself. We are now on the last milestone where we are evaluating the final aspects of the co-creation pathway, which is the co-creation lessons learned. What we did is, of course, different workshops again with the front-runner cities, and we are now trying to establish and cooperate within these different lessons learned and put them all together in different blocks, again, to match with what we have in our scoreboard. The idea here is not to evaluate the cities as based on what they have, but it's no one size fits all in co-creation. What we're trying to do here is to understand how did each city perform, again, as to their own selected set of indicators. So this was the methodology that we used for the co-creation evaluation. Now I'm moving very quickly to the social monitoring framework and how do we also establish a methodology for analysis of nature-based solutions, again in Milan. And how did we evaluate this from a pre-greening measurement before we started the greening procedural and the implementation procedures in 2021. So when we started this project, we established in the co-creation guidance, we thought that we have only 4 macro categories based on the Clever Cities methodology, based on the human health, well-being, sustainable economic prosperity, social cohesion, environmental justice, and citizen safety and security. They were mainly the 4 aspects of the project that we decided to focus on to establish macro categories for evaluation of nature-based solutions within the social methodologies. However, what we figured out is that we needed, again, to reestablish this methodology and rethink about it based on how can we develop this timeline and different steps within the cities. So what we did, again, is to establish a methodology that lasted from 2019 till 2021 with the start of the co-implementation. We had different theory of change workshops, and we had different steps of gathering information, and I will be digging in more into that. However, the main objectives and main outcomes that were expected from this social monitoring within the scoping and the gathering of information, each of the urban living labs that we had started identifying what they want to achieve in their theory of change workshops. So you can see here, for instance, that the green roofs and walls, they decided by focusing more on human health and well-being and to approach connectedness to nature and aesthetics related to green roofs and walls, of course. While, for instance, in CAL 2, which was the Giambellino Community Park, focused more on social cohesion and support between the different communities. Lastly, but in CAL 3, which is the Tibaldi station, to increase a sense of safety and security, especially that it's an open infrastructure and everyone can use the space during the night as well. So when we started by scoping and gathering information of this, for this methodological approach, we started by developing a theoretical model, and this theoretical model focused on these regeneration challenges of the city of Milan. And that meant that we started by identifying different incomes and inputs and activities and outputs as well within our theory of change workshops. These theory of change workshops, they were gathering through different parts of the stakeholder and different parts of the partnership. So we started by doing this a lot of the times. We started by repeating that till we had a saturation of the sample that we had. So, and then we started scientific iteration of the questionnaires development. So we started by focusing on macro indicators, again, breaking that down to micro indicators such as the relationship with nature, how to have a positive impact of greenery, and how to think about environmental values. Not just that, but also the concerns about the perceived ownership of space and different groups in relationship with the space satisfaction after the usage of the space itself. Very quickly stepping into step 5, which is the data collection. So we started by doing different online and on-site questionnaires. We started in 2020, so we were blocked first by the online questionnaires, but then we started going down and having on-site questionnaires as well. So we had a total of 338 full responses and average time of 1940 of data collection through different phases. To sum it up, from the results that we had when we started the analysis, we had the graphical representation divided by these macro areas of challenges. But our aim and our development of this methodology after 1.5 years of research on the themes of the co-design, co-monitoring, and co-implementation, we figured out that it was more oriented to a place-based approach. And this data collection helped us to understand that we have different aspects. So for instance, the city of Milan, we decided that we are not looking at the categories of sustainable economic prosperity because our interventions were mainly looking at the social aspects of human health, citizen safety, social cohesion, and environmental justice. So what we have here from this data collection indicates that we had the color red explains that we have more interest in aspects related to a high percentage of people that have a high sense of cohesion with the space and with their neighborhoods. That, for instance, that they have lived there for more than 5 years and they like the proximity to the parks and the green areas that they have in the neighborhoods. And they think that the connection with the nature-based solutions and the importance of this is very high. That also gives us high evidence on relationship to not just the health and well-being, but also relationship to the environmental justice. And how do we think that this neighborhood is effective, the green parts of this neighborhood. Lastly, but after we reflected on this model, we figured out the survey results also were very significant to social cohesion, on the safety as well, security perception, which reveals a high interest in the maintenance, aesthetics of the nature-based solutions of the green walls and the park that we had in Giambellino, rather than the presence of other people in the space. So this was also lowering the concerns related to safety and security of the people that participated in our survey. And I am done with my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to this, and please ask me any questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Isra. I don't see any questions written yet for Isra. I would really encourage you to ask questions because Isra will need to leave soon. But before we receive some questions from the attendees, I would like to ask Isra more about the evaluation of social benefits of more technical measures, if it's possible to comment on that. You presented, for example, green walls in several of the living labs in Milan. I don't know if the questions were fragmented in the way that it was possible to receive answers on how appreciated those more technical measures are by the local community, and if local community is willing to, for example, be included in maintenance of some new green areas. I remember when we were in Milan visiting Giambellino, for example, Emilia said that it is a big question how the maintenance of green walls, for example, will be organized, because it's beyond the expertise and general, even the budget of the public utility company, and that perhaps it would be necessary for the local community to get engaged in maintaining the NBS. So I don't know if it's possible to extract those information, but yeah, maybe some experiences to be shared on that aspect. Thank you, Isra.
Yeah. Thank you for this question. What we did during the data collection, because it lasted more than a year, eventually, that we started the first questionnaire in June 2020, and we finished in September 2021. So what we did is to try to understand by sampling the population that participated in each neighborhood questionnaire in each one of the urban living labs. What we did is we sampled the socio-demographic aspects. I did not present the tables of the socio-demographic aspects in the presentation, but we have more or less, we have more information about the different social structure of each neighborhood. And when that happened, we figured out that we needed to engage different types of stakeholders, and we had to engage more with not just with the residents of this area, because we focused on this sample when we launched the questionnaire, but also to focus on the businesses. So that's why, if you can remember from the Tibaldi train station, we also decided to engage the University of Bocconi, which are the students from around the area that you will use, of course, this train station. And when we did that, we had to establish a memorandum of understanding, a cooperation with this university as the municipality of Milan. That is just an example, but in the other two examples of green roofs and walls in the first urban living lab, from the implementation, we have now implemented 4 green roofs and walls out of the 10. I don't think that we are doing all the 10 within the lifetime of the Clever Cities project in Milan. But what we did was to do the co-design with the residents of these buildings, in order to make sure that they are interested in the co-monitoring and the co-management of the green roofs and walls afterwards. So you can see as well, for instance, here in this graph, that the red and the orange aspects are mainly related to the people that think that their importance of their green areas in their neighborhood and their building as very important, as part of priority of their why they selected to live in these buildings, because they have a green roof or they have a green wall. And they also have a proximity to parks. So for instance, in Giambellino, this was more related to the satisfaction of the place or space or the neighborhood where they lived in. And we have high rates of perceived ownership of space and place satisfaction as well, in addition to a very strong sense of belonging when we're talking about the psychosocial issues and social cohesion. So when we asked through our questionnaires, when we asked our residents if they think that connection with their neighbors is important for them, and if this can help them think about, okay, why don't we use the green roof that we have in our buildings to have more better social life? So this was the focus mainly of the social monitoring aspects. What we are trying to do now is that we are going to be evaluating the same indicators, the same macro and micro categories in the post-screening. We have completed 4 green roofs and walls from the Urban Living Lab 1. We are waiting for Giambellino to be finalized as a park, but we also have finished the Tibaldi train station. So we are going to be launching the questionnaires of the post-greening and try to evaluate if the pre-greening and post-greening were eventually telling the story of people more willing to participate and more willing to have knowledge about raising their awareness about the importance of green roofs and walls in their neighborhood, rather than just participate in a questionnaire. So yeah, we're trying to do this. I can see a question from the chat, but I'm not sure
there
if
are 3 questions actually in the question and answer. So I will read them all, and then you answer as you prefer in the order you want. So we see the importance of stakeholder contributions in the design phase of NBS. So how are the stakeholders and their contributions in the short and long term after the design? How it develops people's sense of belonging for the preservation and development of the project. That was from Muhammad. Then from Elisa, I saw in the theory of change picture that you had 2 levels of outcomes. The first outcomes, which are transformations in the city, and the other outcomes are changes that are related to stakeholders' health and well-being. I just would like to understand why did you choose to call both of these outcomes instead of using 2 different names? And then Bianca is wondering if concerns about gentrification due to neighborhood improvements were addressed in the project, especially regarding social impacts.
Okay, there are so many questions.
Yes,
okay,
a lot.
Let me try to answer the first one of Muhammad, because the other one I cannot see them yet. So Muhammad is asking about the importance of the stakeholder contribution.
Yes, beyond the project implementation and how it contributes to the people's sense of belonging.
Yeah. What we did is that try to make sure that the same stakeholders that we had since the establishment of the Urban Innovation Partnership from the beginning of the project continue throughout the project. So we did what we call different workshops of then also participate in different events. The Comune di Milano is making sure through the events of Green Week, Milano Green Week is an event that happens all the time around the city and each yearly around the city. And that means that we discuss all the time with our stakeholders, how did we engage them through the project. And we also participate to different other workshops and conferences where we are making sure that we have this open dialogue. The sense of belonging, though, was more looked at from a perspective of users of the spaces of the urban living labs and how can we have that. So in the Giambellino neighborhood, we had an association, we had an existing physical urban living lab space, which is an association called Milo Lab that is in the neighborhood and have the dialogue open with the citizens. So it has different scales as levels of partnerships in this. That's why I was speaking about multi-actor and multi-scalar, different types of interventions and different levels of partnership establishment. And that meant that we also had different roles as in the consortium and the partnership in the city of Milan. So some people focused on the strategic planning of the city, some other people focused on the other levels of commitment. Can you just repeat the theory of change because
yes.
It's not in the chat for me.
Yes, of course. It is about two levels of outcomes regarding theory of change, one related to transformation of the city and the second related to stakeholders' health and well-being. Are those two both outcomes or we should use two different names? Two different notions, words. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when we started doing the activity of theory of change, we had the guidelines that was developed by the partner of the project, that is Technalia. However, what we focused on in the city of Milan is the two scales of the model development. So you can see that some of that is mainly strategic, resulting from the social monitoring of the framework of the whole city. So we had aspects related to strategic planning of the city. How do we fit in different, so Milan has the new Piano Territorio Metropolitano that is looking at implementing nature-based solutions in the whole metropolitan region that is established for the year 2030. We have also the PGT, Piano Governo del Territorio. So there are two different scales of plans and they all aim to establish nature-based solutions within different neighborhoods. So what we did is to focus on these two scales, a strategic scale and a more dedicated neighborhood scale. The outcomes, though, do not focus on the scales, rather focus on what we want to do from the project. What is the output of the project? So when we focused more on a small scale implementation within the urban living labs, we had to eventually downscale our outputs to what we wanted to establish and achieve from this urban living lab, such as focusing on increase the sense of belonging, psychosocial issues, ownership of space and use of space and relationship with nature. So it really depended on the scale where we are doing the theory of change workshop itself. I can see a question for me. How were you able to generate long-term commitment for the maintenance of the project over time? What is the role of community and government stakeholder in this? So as I explained, we had a lot of cooperation. We are 16 partners from the city of Milan, so we're so many. And with some of that is private and some of that is public. So what we did is to establish memorandums of understanding and a lot of cooperation agreements between the different partners. So if we have a public body, such as the municipality implementing a project, we had a private partner supporting with the funds of the maintenance and etc. So it's the long-term commitment, though. We mainly worked on increasing the sense of belonging of the neighborhood. So that would help us more within the implementation and do that. However, we are now just finished with the co-implementation phase, and with the co-monitoring started for the social aspects. The environmental monitoring already started for some of the green roofs and walls that are already there. what we're trying to do now is to raise the awareness. So, excuse me, with the next Milano Green Week, again, we will gather with all our stakeholders and try to showcase what we did and how can we then engage and increase the sense of long-term commitment for the future implementation of nature-based solutions.
With 16 partners, it's really the multi-scholar and multi-actor governance that you mentioned in the presentation. And maybe just shortly to address the last question about the possible gentrification, was that considered in the project planning and implementation?
I would not say so, because it was not a neighborhood that was poor, and then with the green roofs and walls, it started to generate income. And that was not considered in this sense, because it was already a social housing neighborhood, and it will remain a social housing neighborhood. The fact that it has green roofs and walls and connection with the green line, I think I can remove my presentation. If the fact that it has to remove that it has, a lot of green interventions, they were mainly looking at the environmental aspects and how can we enhance the awareness about nature-based solutions within local communities. So the process of doing a gentrification comes when you raise the prices of the housing within the same neighborhood, and that did not happen because it's a social housing program, and eventually the prices did not change because of that. So I would not say that we have faced gentrification, because of, as well, one of the things that we also did from within our social monitoring framework is that we try to map the people that we have in each neighborhood of the interventions, and eventually ask them what they think and how do they feel in 5 more years about the project. I can still reply to some questions, but I don't want to steal the time from the next speaker. So
I think that you covered all the questions, actually. So thank you very much, Isra, for the very interesting and very important presentation, and for your communicative discussion in this follow-up session. And thank you for being with us today. And now I have the pleasure to invite Iva Bedenko to share her presentation and share her experiences from the city of Zagreb with us.
Okay, so I would like to say hello to everybody. I just have to start the presentation. Okay, I guess it is working. Is the presentation on? Okay, it's here. So hi everyone, my name is Iva Bedenko. I'm an architect and I work in the City Office of Economy, Environmental Sustainability and Strategic Planning of the City of Zagreb. So a little bit about Zagreb. I know my colleagues from Serbia know all about Zagreb, but for the people outside of the region, Zagreb is a middle-sized Eastern European city with a continental climate. It's the capital of Croatia. It is situated in the continental climate zone, and it's positioned between the Medvednica mountain on the north and the Sava River plain on the south. So Zagreb is quite a green city. It's surrounded by nature and it's penetrated by areas of nature. So parts of the city, especially in the north, are integrated with the actual natural forests. So nature-based solution in Zagreb maybe means something else than in some other cities. So the nature-based solution I'm going to talk about are part of the ProGirect project, which is it's a project that's funded by the Horizon 2020 program. It's been conducted since June 2018, and it's going to end in November of this year. So I'm going to talk about our experience in monitoring and co-design activities in ProGirect project. Just to give you a short outline, ProGirect is an acronym for Productive Green Infrastructure for Post-Industrial Urban Development. And Zagreb is one of the front-runner cities, along with Dortmund and Torino, and Ningbo in China. And follower cities are Romanian city Cluj-Napoca, Zenica in Bosnia, Piraeus in Greece, and Cascais in Portugal. So Zagreb has its living lab. Well, actually, in the project, living labs are organized in the areas of abandoned industry. In Zagreb, it's in the easternmost municipality of Sesvete, which is the largest municipality in Zagreb and with the youngest population. So it's quite active, but also with a sort of half rural traditional lifestyle, and it's also very green. But in its center is this former meat industry, which has to be re-evaluated and then reclaimed by the citizens. About these living labs, these are like life-sized experiments where nature-based solutions are being implemented in order to reclaim these areas and to make them more accessible to the people, to open them up. And we are doing it with green solutions throughout the project. So about the monitoring and the evaluation, it is being done as part of the project throughout the project course in all the cities. And the idea is to evaluate the changes of space and society in 4 aspects. It's in human health, ecology, economy, and social inclusion. So, of course, a successful nature-based solution should address all of these aspects, or at least more than one. Our living lab is we are implementing several nature-based solutions there, and well, they are being monitored. So here you can see we conducted a questionnaire in the Sesvete area on 300 participants, and another one in a control area where there are no nature-based solutions being implemented. We only have the pre-implementation results. So I'm just giving you some of the graphs, and this is also the assessment of the vegetation in the area, which is also being done through the project. There are many others. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm trying to sort of tell a story of one particular NBS that's going on in Zagreb. So of the NBS, we have, I'm going to come back to here. We have this, we already implemented an info point for the project where we meet, where we have meetings, where we have workshops, and where all kinds of activities are taking place. It is being operated by our local partner, which is Green and Blue Sesvete. It's an NGO, and they are super important for the local activities. We also have 2 urban garden activities, 2 urban garden NBSs. One is the modernization of the existing urban garden, which is an allotment garden for the citizens with plots of 50 square meters. So within the project, it's going to be modernized with the solar purification and the solar distribution of the water to all the plots. And another one also had to be a new urban garden, but during the co-design, we have actually realized that there is a large need for a therapeutic garden. So we explored it through the co-design workshop that were organized through the project, and we expanded that on another workshop. We met a couple of times with the people who are therapists and who are working with the people who would be users of the therapeutic garden. So this is the existing garden necessity that is going to be modernized. And through these workshops that I mentioned, we designed, I mean, not us, well, the landscape designer whose son is also a user of those therapeutic institutions because he's also disabled. He designed the therapeutic garden following all the input that we got in the workshop from the therapists who work with those children and grown-ups, of course. The therapeutic garden was opened in June of 2021, and it's been used ever since because the users were really ready to do it. There are several institutions that were included in this workshop and that work with children and grown-ups with different disabilities that express the need for gardening. So, and there was no therapeutic gardening in the city of Zagreb. Actually, I think there is one in Croatia, but it is linked, it's on the island of Rab, and it's linked to a psychiatric hospital, so it's not open to the public. Unlike this one, which is sort of partially open to the public, it's being tended, it's being managed by Milan. It's a daycare center for children with disabilities. And the other users are this the Society for People with Cerebral Palsy, and the Novi Elkovec institution, which is situated very near the therapeutic garden and which attends to the people who outgrow the Maledon daycare facility. So they work with children until they are 21, and after 21, these people are being tended to by Novi Elkovec. So all of them are they're making everyday like agenda. So when they plant the vegetables, they are being tended to. Every day somebody comes to water them, and the people spend their time there a lot. So just like to give you back this picture, so you can see this garden is organized in a way that the users, the children, have complete safety, because these people and these children are usually sheltered from the world. They're very, very vulnerable, so they need to be protected from all kinds of things that can be harmful to them. And they are not really free to explore the world with all of their senses. So this therapeutic garden is giving them an opportunity to do so. So the children come there with their parents outside of the daycare, and the grown-ups come there with their therapists, and they spend time there. They plant the vegetables and the flowers, and they socialize with other people, with children who are healthy. So the stigma is sort of being removed from their lives, or at least diminished, which is really important. So they are organizing workshops of doing. They were doing workshops with all kinds of herbs. They were making some sort of I don't know what it's called, but they were making some sort of essential oils from these herbs, and picking flowers and everything. So now back to our topic, why we are here. We are talking about how to monitor the well-being of or the benefit that the society and the city gains from an NBS or from an implementation. So we had quite a challenge here, because most of the users are either not verbal or only partially verbal. So during the project, we had to think of a way to make this benefit visible in a way, because most of the other NBS have this particular activity through a questionnaire, and you can't make a questionnaire for non-verbal or very challenged people. So then we came up to the solution of creating a word cloud, which unfortunately is not finished yet, but I can show you here. Here are the users, and their therapists have included these words that came to them. So the first 12 rows are people who are not verbal. So these are actually the words of the therapists, and they try to express like in one word or in one phrase what is the benefit that they are gaining. And then the other ones are verbal. They're just have some sort of moving difficulty, and they were using those words. So when I was translating that to English, I saw that a lot of these words were repeated. So it's peace, it's play, it's happiness. So I think when the word cloud is done, it will be even more obvious. But we know now that, from what I talked to the therapist, it's been quite a success. So, and of course, we have the word clouds, we have the questionnaires, but actually a boy who is in a wheelchair and who can water some lettuce with his mother is maybe the best way to show what is the benefit of such an NBS. But luckily, we did find a way to put that into words. So I guess that would be all from my side. I was trying not to go into too many details to not confuse people, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Eva, for sharing with us this very important story and very sensitive. I do have a question about 2 points, more related to the regime. You said that the garden is partly open to the public. If you could explain us a bit more on how it functions, and a little bit on the NGO Green and Blue Sesvete. Was it established during the project, and what is their role, and how you include the wider community, and which social impacts does it have? And of course, I invite all the attendees to post questions in the Q&A tab or the chat.
Okay, so first about the use. The everyday use of the therapeutic garden is organized, and the raised beds are divided among those institutions that I mentioned earlier. But it is possible to contact the Mali Dom facility, which has been organized by the city of Zagreb. So it's actually, it's not directly city-owned, but it's managed through the city. And they have organized already children's play and some workshops. So it's not open in a way that you can just walk up from the street, but you can organize to visit. You can organize some sort of I don't know, get together of the children with disabilities and healthy children. And it was sort of slow during the COVID times, but I guess this year will be hopefully luckier, because this population is super sensitive. So these children can get really can come really backwards. They can have really huge problems if they contract COVID. So they need to be extra careful about it. And about the Green and Blue Sesvete, it's a local NGO that was organized. It was established, I think, maybe a year or two before the project. They were their aim was to transform this central part of Sesvete, which is where is this former industry, which is the living lab. So they have the idea of bringing public buildings into this area, but these green interventions were sort of like a first step towards reclaiming this space. So some of it will probably be like a temporary solution, but at the moment it's, as you could see in this particular slide with the former silo in the behind, you can see how this area is getting more and more orderly, and it's becoming more civilized in a way. So yeah, that would be the answer to your questions. I don't know. I don't see any other questions. I was either clear or it's not interesting enough.
I think you were very clear, and the story is also highly interesting and highly relevant. And it's interesting as an opposition also to the approach that Isra presented previously with very elaborated and complex questionnaires. This is a quite different approach, but both are extremely important. And thank you so much for sharing the story about Sesvete with us today. If we have some message in the chat, okay, from Elisa. Have you thought about trying to express the impact in monetary terms, similar as in a cost-benefit analysis?
Well, for this particular nature-based solution, it's not feasible. It has to. It's not something that can generate profit. So in the project, we have the whole market aspect work package, where it is where the whole. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So in the name of the project, you hear a productive green infrastructure. So the idea was to have this aspect of productivity. So in the urban gardens, you have the productivity in, on a singular scale, because people don't have to go to the supermarket. They can grow their own vegetables. But here, the main benefit is inclusion and health of the people who are using the garden, and of course their families and their surroundings. So in this particular nature-based solution, I don't think there's room for any kind of economic activities.
But maybe it's not for generating profit, but for reducing costs, like medical costs, and as you said, the food costs. So that is enough.
Oh yeah. If you
just
put
mention
it this
monetary
way,
expression, yes, not profit generation. So I think it can be relevant.
Yeah, and these things are hard to measure. Actually, this is why the monitoring tool was. Of course, I know, Elisa, what you think, and it does make sense. But it's really hard to measure it, because you have to go through therapists who work with those children who are overworked, of course, all the time. So we are super happy to get the word cloud, and they're really happy to respond with whatever we do have. But it's an interesting idea. I think we should think about it. So thank you, Elisa, for that.
I really agree with that. I think it would be very important to develop the methodology for that monetary expression in the future, because I think it is important to communicate NBS benefits in those terms as well. So if we don't have any more questions, and we are also approaching towards the end of our timing for the webinar, I would just like to make a couple of final remarks. As you know, you can see the recordings of our webinars at the YouTube channel of Cities with Nature, and the recording of today's webinar will be there as well. If you haven't done already, you can answer to our Urban by Nature survey, because we really do promote co-creation and we want to practice it as well. And finally, if you haven't joined the Urban by Nature, you can sign in for receiving a newsletter and news bits using the QR code on this slide. As we mentioned, this is the last webinar in the series that we envisaged through the Clever Cities project, but we will keep the hub alive through the New Horizon project NBS at the World that we are implementing. Also, we will try to organize a session at the Nature of Cities New Festival, as we did last and the year before. And it is our pleasure to announce that there will be the opportunity for some of the most active members of our Southeastern European hub to join the big NBS conference in September in Hamburg, which will be like the closing conference of 4 NBS sister projects. So thank you very much. Thank you to our great panelists. Thank you to all attendees. And we are looking forward to continue discussion with you in some new formats that we will announce and inform you about. Goodbye to everybody.